Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll show you how to build and decorate an underwater house without using any mods. This is the same method that I used to build my entry for Gaming with Kristi's Happy Gamers Tiny House competition, where it was voted most unique design by the awesome community that's over there. This guide will be broken down into a few sections: the process I used, how to build furniture and crafting stations underwater, how to decorate with item stands, and then challenges that you'll encounter. I recommend that you build in water that's between 8 and 14 meters deep. Any deeper than 14 meters and the water will become very difficult to see through. And shallower water can be a challenge when trying to build furniture, storage, and crafting stations underwater. First, you'll need a structure close to the water surface. I recommend having something similar to what I have here. At the very least, you'll need a 4-meter beam close to the water to build against, and 2 poles that run as deep into the water as you can build them. It's okay if they don't reach the bottom yet. Part of this process includes building support all the way to the bottom. I also recommend having all of your crafting stations built nearby, an escape route for when you fall into the water, and a spawn point for when you drown. First, I'll show you what I like to call the Valheim elevator. Build a carve here, as close to the structure as you can, and as centered on the beam as you can. Build a beam here and here. This will hold the carve in place against the waves. You can push against these beams to move the carve forwards or backwards depending on where you need it, and you can move the carve side to side as well by building a beam here and then pushing against it. It's very important that the carve is as centered as it can be and as close to here as it can be. Build a beam here, directly underneath the beam under it. Quickly do the same for the other side. This will pretty much lock the carve into place. Set the angle of the sails like this by using the carve's rudder and paddling backwards. Stand towards the middle of the boat and build beams directly underneath the previous beams so that they clip through the boat just above the deck. This will push the carve down underwater one beam at a time, kind of like a submarine or an elevator. Be sure to build evenly to keep your boat as level as possible. There are 2 easy mistakes that can cause you to have to restart your elevator from the surface. For example, I accidentally built this beam offset from where I need it to be. When this happens to you, don't delete the offset beam. It will cause the boat to shake and your character will float away. Instead, build a pole like this on the opposite side and then build the beam in its correct spot. Then, delete the accidental beam. The second mistake is typically not recoverable and happens when the beam gets built under the deck instead of above it. To avoid having this happen, make sure you're only building beams that are directly under the previous beam that you built. They should clip through the top of the boat, just above the deck of the boat. Break the beams at the top of the elevator to keep the sails from touching the beams. Carefully loot the wood that's floating on the surface for as long as you can. If you leave it up there, it will block your view. As you get lower, make sure you complete any unfinished support poles that you can reach. I like to build the poles on either side of the boat as well. These poles act like scaffolding for you to build your elevator with. Once you reach the depth that you want, you can start to build your structure. I recommend planning your build in sections as you are limited by the distance your character can build, as well as your inventory space. I broke this build down into 3 sections and then built enough scaffolding first so that I knew I could reach everything that I wanted to build. I also recommend that you build the roof last and the side walls last because it's very easy to run the boat into the walls as you're going down. You aren't normally able to build furniture and crafting stations underwater, and I think this is because the game locks those pieces above the surface of the water, just like it does with the camera. But there are times that the camera itself will dip underwater, mostly at night and during storms, or when waves are higher, and that's when you're able to put furniture or crafting stations underwater. Select the build piece that you want to place and aim your cursor in the general area that you want to build it in. Wait for a wave to come by and force your camera underwater. You'll know this happens when you see the build piece appear at your cursor. You'll have a second or two to build the piece that you want to place, so be ready to click fast. Decorating an underwater structure just requires that your character is within reach of the item or armor stands that you place. Place your item stand, and try to stand as close to it as you can without leaving the deck of your boat. Because of the camera angle and water, you will probably need to play with your cursor positioning to be able to interact with the stand. If you can't reach the stand, you'll need to bring your character closer to it so that you can interact with it, which means you'll need to have another elevator position, or move your item stands closer to your character so that you can interact with them. Which leads us neatly into some of the challenges that you'll encounter. One of the biggest challenges is the camera angle. You can use the elevator to force your character underwater, but your camera will, for the most part, stay anchored to the water surface. if you find yourself struggling to see what you're doing, sometimes it's because of the weather or the time of the day, or it can honestly just be because your eyes are tired. Keep in mind, using the elevator requires near perfect placement of the build pieces. If you make a mistake on the elevator and misclick a beam placement, you will probably have to start from the surface. If you get shaken off the boat, you will need to remove all of the beams that you built for the elevator. There really isn't a gentle way to get your boat back to the surface, and about half the time you will probably just need to rebuild it. The number one reason for having to restart from the surface is because the boat gets shaken or jiggled. When the boat gets jiggled, your character will lose contact with the deck of the boat and will be sent rocketing back to the surface. The boat will get jiggled if anything touches the bottom, like build pieces or anything on the lake bed. Your character will also lose contact with the deck of the boat if you jump, if you interact with the rudder, use the ladder, or if you hold fast anywhere. And that's about it. This process was really challenging to figure out, and it was a lot of fun to do. Thank you for watching, thank you for being subscribed, and I'll see you in another video.